light, for our board of directors meeting, December 19th. Welcome, and I'll call the meeting to order. Our first item of business will be called on Bill Nolan of Payne County to lead us in prayer. Bill.
Let us pray. O God, our liberation and peace, we seek the power of your Spirit, that we may live in full union with you, ourselves, and our sisters and brothers with mental illness. May our actions and decisions lead us to overcome fear, acquire knowledge, and be advocates for compassion and enlightened treatment and service. May we go forward into our communities with a renewed sense of vision, hope, and new beginnings for the future. Amen.
Thank you, Bill. Has everyone had a chance to look over the agenda? And if so, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I second that motion.
All right, there's a motion and a second. All in favor of approving the agenda, say aye. Aye. Opposed? That's unanimous. Okay, at this time, we'll have public comment. First up will be Mary Short from Alexander County.
Hello, I'm Mary Short, and this is my daughter, Katie. Katie and I went to the Medicaid Reform Committee meeting in Raleigh, and we're actually very pleased to see the room filled with sort of non-mental health, developmental disability, substance abuse service people, and that it was sort of the rest of Medicaid was there, doctors, hospitals, pharmacists, things of that nature. But one of the more interesting presentations of the day was given by Trish Barnum, and she works at DHHS in a program called Money Follows the Person. And she gave a report about long-term services and supports. The audio for that Medicaid Reform Committee has been posted to the Medicaid Reform website. And if you get a chance, you should listen to her report. During part of her presentation, her slides did not include the IDD community, the intellectual developmental disability group, but during her presentation, she included IDD individuals as she was talking about long-term services and supports, which gives me hope that through this Medicaid reform process, maybe we, the IDD community, will be pulled out of the LME-MCO system. Then, Katie and I went to the Health and Human Services Oversight Committee meeting, and I learned a fascinating Medicaid issue that I hadn't had any idea before about. Under maintenance of service, MOS, I never really gave much thought about maintenance of service and how that works. If you're a Medicaid recipient and Medicaid DMA reduces or terminates your services, you can file an appeal, and you have a right to maintenance of service while you're in the appeal process. Okay, I totally understand that. I understand in the MCO system that, you know, there's managed care action, blah, blah, blah. But what came up at the meeting that I never ever heard before is when a Medicaid beneficiary is receiving maintenance of service, that's all 100% state dollars. It's not the usual 2/3 federal dollar, 1/3 state dollar, and it's only after the appeal process, if the beneficiary wins, so that the services aren't reduced or terminated, then the feds go ahead and send their 2/3 part of the money. So I never knew that about maintenance of service, and so I figured you all didn't know that either, but isn't that interesting? So I would think, well, anyway, I just thought you all wanted to know that. And I'm still concerned about the number of individuals on the innovations waiver waiting list.
speaker is Jerry Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Good to see y'all again. Wishing you a Merry Christmas to start with. You all have family, hope it's safe and exciting as mine is. We've had a few more deaths by suicide since I last saw you, and within our catchment area. And I'm going to keep that on the front burner because that's what we're working for, is to prevent those kind of things. And the state, I think, is looking at it from an electrician point of view. I don't think the state has got their heart where we have as individuals here. And that's why I appreciate the individuals on the board, is we're trying to look at people as individuals. We're trying to help. That's what we taught growing up, with help each other. The things that I'm concerned about, and I'm going to shoot toward the future, because I've been here all these years watching this trend day by day, month by month, and videoing it, and I see a trend, and this train is one of them fast. You know what them fast is, them Amtrak? But when they go off the track, let me tell you, it ain't a pretty sight, is it? Well, they're one headed that direction. It's the MCO stuff and the state. My experience this week with my brother being in the hospital with a stroke right here in the Mission Hospital. This week on physical health, if behavioral health is going to be treated the way physical health has been, from my experience this week, we're in for a serious problem. Had 19 people coming in the room, nobody knows which one was doing what. And let me tell you, that's not comfort. If we didn't have a large family and everybody attending and being there, my brother probably wouldn't come out alive. That's just a basic fact. So, what I see happening here is the state is looking at dollars. They're not looking at lives, they're looking at dollars. Every meeting I go to is dollars. But the human side of this thing, we're headed down a path here to physical health according to the government. But this behavioral health, what I'm seeing is every time we meet, they're taking money away from us. They're cutting rates. They're seeing our fund balance go up, then they cut the rate. Then the waiting list gets longer, but they ain't letting us use the fund balance to really do the service. But they're cutting the services, and we're headed toward getting our sales tax increase to the counties and to the municipalities. And the state of North Carolina is going to look good when it comes to their fund balance and how they look good in the black. But for the people of North Carolina that need these services that we're talking about around the table, they're not going to get it. Because when you start cutting money, you're cutting services. And when the state sucks money out, it looks good in one way, but it's taken away from the people. I'm concerned about people. Let me tell you, as much as I travel, I see the need. And the people that did use this service at one time or the other, they still need that service. They're not getting it. Now, you ask me why? I think they're discouraged. They're downtrodden. They're beaten down because they can't get in that revolving door. They say it's a no wrong door. I think every door is a wrong door because they're not getting in. And these people that commit suicide, these are people that used to be in your system. And that's not all. Behavioral health, it's turning into physical health. They're going to the hospital and they're being shipped out the back door to caskets, whatever. And the mental health is turned into something else, so they don't have to say it's anything to do with mental health. But it's all to do with the mental health. So thank you very much, and keep your eyes on what I'm talking about, because this thing is headed in the way that we don't want it. People are not going to be served. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next item on the agenda is Consumer and Family Advisory Committee. I'd like to call on Pat McGinnis.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here for CFAC, and I want to wish everyone happy holidays. Our CFAC Steering Committee met for the first time since consolidation on December the 9th. Brian Ingram spoke to our steering committee about the merger agreement and the Western Region Partnership. Our members continue to be involved in various committees, cross-functional teams, the provider council, state to local CFAC calls, as well as activities in the community and throughout the state, if not the nation. And actually, I was on the state to local CFAC call last night, and we were actually talking about a national matter briefly, which was the legislation that Representative Tim Murphy has introduced, which is, I believe, HR Bill 3717, and a lot of the consumer groups and Mental Health America says that it will jeopardize the role of consumers in the recovery. So I'm concerned about that. I hope some of you will take a look at it. And I realize that the increased violence out there linked to mental illness is not a good thing. But, I don't want, because somebody else done something wrong, somebody telling me how I need to live my life. And there are thousands of people like me out here trying to live in society with our diagnoses and not harm anybody. So when you're looking at things, I hope people will take a look at that. And in January, our regional CFACs are going to meet. They're going to meet the Central Region January the 13th, the Western Region January the 14th, the Northern Region January the 21st, and the Southern Region January the 27th. Thank you for allowing me to be here, and we appreciate the support y'all give CFAC and the relationship that we have working with you. Looking forward to going forward.
Thank you, Pat. Next item on the agenda is the Finance Committee report. I'd like to call on Chairman of the Finance Committee, Ed Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I will call on Lisa Slusher for item number 1, which is our audit, and she will introduce our audit committee and go to my there.
Thank you. With us tonight, we have Mr. Wayne Terry and Mr. Jeremy Hicks from Clifton Larson Allen. They performed Smokey's fiscal year 12-13 audit, and they're going to do the audit presentation.
I think I passed out most of these. Did any of you around the table not get one? Jeremy is going to do the first part. So if he wants to start on passing that.
Sure. Again, I'm Jeremy Hicks. I'm a partner with Clifton Larson Allen in our Charlotte office. Appreciate the opportunity to be here today to present the audit report. We're gonna use this handout that Wayne just passed around as kind of a guide as we go through the presentation. Wayne has previously met with the Finance Committee and gone through the report in a pretty good amount of detail, so we'll do a more abbreviated version here. But starting behind tab B within your handout, which is our required auditor communications. Behind tab A. Required auditor communications. It is our responsibility as auditors to express an opinion on the fair presentation of the financial statements in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. We have issued an unmodified opinion on your financial statements, which is the highest level of assurance that we can offer. As part of our audit procedures, we do evaluate their internal control over financial reporting. We use that internal control assessment along with our risk assessments that we perform during the planning stages to determine the nature, timing, and extent of the procedures that we will perform during field work for the audit. We do utilize a risk-based approach during the audit, so we'll focus more time on the more risky areas for the organization. The plan, scope, and timing of the audit proceeded as planned as was discussed in April 2013, prior to beginning the audit engagement. As far as significant accounting policies go, management is responsible for those accounting policies, and those are outlined in Note 1 to the financial statements. There were no significant changes in accounting policies or new policies adopted. There is a new reporting format that was applicable this year that Wayne will touch on a little bit as he goes through some high-level analysis of the financial statements. As far as significant accounting estimates go, the most significant estimate for the organization is the liability for incurred but not reported claims. Based on the procedures that we perform, the estimates used and recorded by management appear reasonable. The disclosures included in your financial statements are neutral, consistent, and clear. Flipping over to the next page. Audit adjustments, we did not have any audit adjustments that were recorded. We did have a couple of client-prepared adjustments that were provided to us. One to record a settlement related to some single-stream funding, and also just some reclassification items within fund balance. There were also no unrecorded or past adjustments made during the audit process. There were no disagreements with management regarding accounting, reporting, or other auditing matters, and no significant difficulties encountered in performing the audit. And then also management did provide us with a signed management representation letter upon issuing the financial statements. So I'll turn it over to Wayne and he'll go through some highlights of the financial statements.
On tab B1, starting there, again, as Jeremy mentioned, the audit opinion was unmodified. That's a new term this year. For all the way back to the dark ages, it was referred to as an unqualified opinion. I think there was confusion there because that was the best opinion, but you would not believe how many times I've been asked at a board meeting, why can't I get a qualified opinion, which is not. The opinion is first in the audit, and then comes management's discussion and analysis, which is provided to us by management. Lisa did that. It's a high-level overview, more condensed version of the financials. Then the statement of net position on the accrual basis, all of this accrual basis financials are new this year. And in the past, you were reporting, your primary reporting model was on modified accrual. You still have that, but it's supplementary information only to comply with the state statutes. Your primary reporting model now is accrual-based, which basic differences are that you include capital assets on the balance sheet, you depreciate them, you include any long-term debt, which in your case is compensated absences and your OPEB liability. On a modified accrual, you don't have depreciation, you just expense the asset as it's purchased and don't spread it over any kind of useful life. That did necessitate a statement of cash flows, which is a required statement under full accrual. Next section is the notes to the financial statements, which expand on, give you more information on what's in the financials. There's a supplementary schedule of OPEB, which is the other post-employment benefits for health insurance for retirees. That's information coming from the actuary who did that actuarial study. And then the next section, balance sheet under the budgetary basis, which is modified accrual, statement of revenues, expenditures, changes in fund balance, again on the modified accrual basis. And because there are differences in the classification of fund balance, there's a schedule of committed fund balance, which is the primary difference between full accrual and modified accrual. Those are the actions that the board has actually designated for specific purposes in the modified accrual statements. The internal service fund, this was the final year of that because you went from self-funded to an insurance basis. And then the final section is the single audit reports and compliance section. Again, the report was, or the opinion was unmodified. The statement of net position indicates continued improvement in your financial position. Unrestricted cash equal 73 days of cash based on your 2013 operating expenses. Unrestricted net position, unrestricted equity was about almost 12% of your 2013 operating expenses. And you did not have any stewardship violations related to budgetary, your budget expenses or revenues. Your revenues on the modified accrual basis were 5.9, or your net position increased by $5.9 million. You administered almost $35 million of federal and state assistance, which was about $3.4 million more than 2012. There were no findings, no instances of noncompliance related to medical records, and financial statement indicated no material witnesses in internal controls as we do with all the entities, because there is still transition going on in the state, we just recommend that you keep looking at areas of internal controls to tighten those as changes in the system take place. And we do appreciate Alyssa and her staff for the audit assistance they gave us while we were there. Any questions on that part? There's a couple of other items. Again, we had no material weaknesses in internal control noted. We did have a couple of items that we do what are not the norm in a governmental audit anyway, and that's drafting of a financial statement and obviously a few consulting items, but we remained independent during that whole process. Under accounting trends, there's some items in there. This is things that may take place or will take place as we go forward. We went over those in detail during the Finance Committee, so I'm not going to go into much there right now. But if there's no questions, and I'll be glad to address any now or at any time in the future, just let me know. I'll be glad to get in touch with you. Thank you.
Lisa, do you have anything up your end right there now?
No, I just want to thank Wayne and Jeremy and the other staff at Clifton Larson Allen. It was the first year they'd done Smokey's audit. I think they had some staff turnover. We had staff turnover. Medicaid waiver being new, I think probably the first year was a little more challenging than either one of us would probably like to have. But we were pleased with the report and their dedication and professionalism.
Thank you very much. We put the finance report on the first of the agenda tonight because these gentlemen are out of Charlotte and they can get back on the road as quick as they can. To continue our finance committee report, in your packet you had on the agenda that for the finance committee, you had item number 4 and 5, which were the financial reports and the financial dashboards. They were presented to the finance committee and both of them were approved. Then we had the audit presentation. It was also approved. We also, during that period of time, and hearing that, we had a presentation regarding the New Mountain property and the travel reimbursement program. All of you got copies of that. That was approved. And then the first quarter physical monitoring report was presented, and that was approved. So I would offer a motion that you approve the actions of your finance committee this evening.
Is there a second? Any questions? All in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. The next section are items that we have on the agenda concern the board of directors items. And there's a number of items that are interrelated that we need to talk about tonight. Before we get started, though, I would like to take a couple of minutes to introduce our new chief counsel, Tracy Hayes. Tracy, would you stand up so everybody can see you? You want to say a few words and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure.
Sure, why not, right?
Why not? As Rick mentioned, my name's Tracy Hayes. I come to Smoky after having spent about 7 years at the North Carolina Attorney General's office, where I represented the state Medicaid program and the state division of mental health. After that, I spent a year at Alliance, which is one of the other LME MCOs, and I have come to Smoky. I'm very excited about being here. My husband accepted a position at the University of North Carolina here in Asheville, and I followed him out. And I'm really thrilled to be here with all of you and hope that I can help us as we move through the transitions in the coming years.
We welcome you. Sure do. I'd also like to take a minute and recognize Charles Lyons. Charles, will you recognize your members introduce yourselves?
Hello, everyone. Thanks to see you all again. This is Mark Pittman from Polk County. You'll be a member when the board is reconstituted. And Carl Classen from Rutherford County Manager.
again, tied to these, we have 6 items in this area. First, I want to, one of the items I want to speak about later tonight is about the merger, and would like to recommend a merger committee, 3 members, Commissioner Ronnie Beal from Macon County, Andy Stone, and myself serve on that committee, and that'll be in meetings with Brian, of course, and representatives of partners and Centerport. So those are the recommendations. Would someone entertain a motion to approve that?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor of the appointment of the merger committee as noted, say aye. Aye. You opposed? Okay, thank you. Rolling right along the standing review of disclosures, I don't believe there's any tonight. Conflict of interest in business transactions, I don't think there's any tonight, is there? Under the executive committee report, we met earlier today at 1 o'clock, covered a number of items. We talked about board governance, regionalization, we talked about the consolidation agreement, we talked about a number of other things, and during that discussion we talked about the reconstituted board. Several of you have asked about when this would happen. Here's the thought process. January will be the final meeting with this board, and in February we have our retreat, which would be February 28th or March 1st. That's when the newly constituted board would take office and participate in the retreat. So we'd like for everybody to make a special effort to be here at our next meeting. We want to do some special recognitions at that time, but that's the game plan. Does everybody understand? And in conjunction with that, normally at this time, we have a nominating committee and we vote on officers in December. But since we're going through this change, I think it'd be a good idea to wait until February to do that, to have a nominating committee then, and also with the bylaws. So I believe we need a motion to let us wait, basically to waive the bylaws, the current bylaws, to allow us to wait until February. So could we have a motion for it to allow us to do that?
I'll make that motion.
Okay.
I'll second.
All right. Does everybody understand what we're talking about? We're just really just trying to extend it a couple more months. Okay. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Okay. Any opposed? All right. We have received, under official communications received, we have received a resolution requesting the Smoky Mountain Center County participation in distribution of maintenance and effort funds. We have received the resolution from Mitchell County. Just want to note that. Okay. I believe that covers about everything we need to have a closed session concerning Smoky Mountain Evergreen to closed session pursuant to subsection 143.318.11A3 and 6 of General Statutes of North Carolina to consult with attorneys in order to preserve attorney-client privilege. And again, that's for the Smoky Mountain Center Evergreen matter. Is there a motion to go into closed session? Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
You're warmed up, buddy.
Slusher, and just what an outstanding job, she's done, and we have an audit report. It's pure as the driven snow. It doesn't get any cleaner than that, despite, all that we've taken on and done with the transition, and that is just awesome, so.
Thank you, Brian. Really, I should say there are a number of staff under me that are doing most of the work that results in the report. So I just would like to acknowledge them.
It makes us all look good.
And I want to echo that too. That makes it so much better to serve on the board when the finances are in order. And that's one of the things I want to make sure that all the finances are in order on the boards. I want to say thank you.
Thank you.
That's what it is.
Okay, there's, through combination of what was in your packet and what's at your seat, there's several handouts related to regionalization. Your chairman reported the information related to the committee that will work with the other board members from those MCOs. We had a, call it an icebreaker at Pinehurst that just was convenient because there were several board members from the other MCOs there, and we had folks there, so we just kind of came together and had lunch together. I'll just show you what we have and try to do it in the best order. The notion that we are headed towards regionalization is now, I think we've reached the point of no return. One request that the secretary had through Dave Richard, the division director, was that on behalf of the council, and this is the letterhead, what it looks like here, and this was in your packet, that the MCOs essentially take a straw poll and communicate their position. And it was really associated with the timing of Pinehurst because there was interest, because there's so much awareness associated with that conference. There are 800 people there. That it would be great if she could, at that conference, announce that we've kind of gotten to this milestone, and that was the case. The letter here is, again, on behalf of the council, representing each of the MCOs where there is agreement from all now, and there were a couple of holdouts right until about the last moment, that all of us were in line around this plan for regionalization. And it's the same thing we've talked about for some time. The 4 regions, 1 in the west, 1 in the east, and 2 in the central. The geographic contiguity, well, except for some kind of historical issues, and the range being, we're shooting for 300,000 with the Medicaid population. So there's nothing new about this. This is what we've talked about for some time. The only thing new is that now everybody is singing from the same hymnal on this, and that was communicated to the secretary. So we have that. And interestingly enough, I think this was Tuesday, DHHS did a press release that is, for the most part, restating what's in the letter. Okay, so now we have the secretary saying, yippee, hooray, we've gotten there, this regionalization effort is for real, and there's agreement that this is going to happen. What pace that will take and other issues around kind of where the rubber meets the road are not indicated, but this is becoming something that is more and more solid with every day. So you have those 2 documents. Also, I mentioned that we were committed to a communication on a monthly basis with the work of this regionalization effort with CenterPoint and partners and us, and in your packet is the December 3rd update. And to be honest with you, there's not a lot of new information there. It's refinement of things we were working on. It talks about the meeting of the board members. We've become more organized in our processes with the subgroups that are, again, it's very much like what we did with Western. Certain business processes and business areas within the organization, we've put committees together to look at those functions, and that's becoming, we're getting better and better at doing that and kind of getting further down the road with that. Other than that, I'm not sure there's really an awful lot here more. One of the things that this group of board members will tackle is some sort of letter of intent. And, that'll just be a statement on behalf of the board and Smokey that, yeah, we're in on this. And it'll be a same letter will be agreed to by the partner board and the center county board. So all of those typical kinds of milestones you would see in something like this are getting lined up. The idea is for that first meeting with board members to occur sometime in January. And they're going to do that over video. It's just travel is so challenging for folks. So they expect that there'd be a regular, at least monthly, if not more often, scheduled series of meetings for that. Also, there is this data points. Again, we had this last month, and this is not going to change. We're going to do, another issue of this in probably beginning January 1st, 2014. This is fairly static. There's not a lot of value in reissuing this every month because it doesn't change a lot. It's not a dynamic kind of thing. Did add a column here that basically accumulates all the data, either sums it or averages it. One other addition to this is going to be related to the number of providers we have in common, really. And I had a piece of paper that I had earlier. I can tell you. Let me just go grab that. Just the same, it's the typical kinds of things that people are interested to know about. And this does not state a total number of providers, but it's just a statement of those providers for which there is overlap between the three or between any two. So there are 75 providers who serve all three MCOs. There are 39 providers who serve CenterPoint and partners in common. There are, and of course this is now on top of the 75. There are 22 providers who serve CenterPoint and Smokey, and 166 providers who serve both partners and Smokey. So the greatest relationship service agencies is with partners and Smokey, of course, which makes sense. So there'll be a little refinement to that data, and that will be in addition to this document. Other than that, I'm open to questions and anything you might want to talk about with this. It's quite a process. We had a meeting on Wednesday of this week, all day in Hickory, of the steering committee, which is comprised of myself and Christina, Julie, and now Tracy. And then there's, I think each of us now have 4 that come together to, review the work of the committees and sort of forge ahead. So, any questions? 35 counties is a lot of counties. If you look at that map, and they did publish the map as part of that press release, that's some real estate. And we'll keep you posted. Let's see.
Right, just the legislation getting involved in any way to direct that difference.
Very good question. Very good question. I think it makes of sense to continue to reflect on what we know and what we don't know about all of this. So let's talk about what we know. What we know is that the MCOs were told if you want to have a place in the Medicaid reform plan, you need to get down to 4. Now, what that place is going to be, we haven't been told yet. But we know that in March 14th or 17th, the Secretary is responsible for addressing the General Assembly with her plan, the state's plan for Medicaid reform. And again, that's in legislation from last year, it was in the budget bill. So that'll be our first real glimpse. Not our first, because really, let me back up a little bit. There is this, I'm not quite sure what it's called, the Medicaid reform panel or group. It's a small group that's going to have one meeting, and they will continue to meet. And this will be a good place for the state to kind of test out some ideas and for there to be some discussion, start to show their hand. So that group will meet, and then in March, the Secretary will have to have the plan unveiled. And then what happens, the General Assembly has to approve it. And again, that's in statute. The governor and the Secretary can't do anything without the approval of the General Assembly. And of course, that was a big piece of legislation that was put in last year, just over concern that the General Assembly wouldn't somehow be bypassed as if there would be any way they really could. So what they'll meet till, and I guess I heard someone tell me that they've drawn a line in the sand, it's going to be June 29th or something like that. They're going to end the session. Well, what are we going to have when they get done? I think there's an awful lot of interest in there being some plan. Will it be what the Secretary proposes? Who knows? But I think it'll be something. I don't think anybody believes that there can be more time to study and go on to some other unknown. I think there's a lot of interest in something changing, and that the integration of behavioral health and services for those with intellectual and developmental disabilities all needs to come together with physical health. Yeah, I think there's a lot of agreement about that. How that's done and who has an opportunity to manage that care is where we get into the debate. Certainly the Secretary's position has been a radical 180 from where the state was even months ago, where there was no plan for the MCOs in the future. So it's a very different direction. A lot of, and you see in this press release, there's a lot of interest shown in us being part of that plan. And again, exactly how we don't know yet. So I think the General Assembly also is favorably inclined towards public health. Look at the investment the state has made over the last X number of years to do this. And we do have all counties in the state now under waiver. And you know what? It works. We're an example of it working. And if you look at that in terms of financially, what it does work, we've bent the curve on Medicaid. Less money is being spent because care is being managed, not because care is being denied per se. Overall care is being managed. So, General Assembly, I think, is pretty much in line with this. So let's say at that point, there's some plan comes together, and the state would then need to apply for another waiver. The 1915 BC waiver that we operate in, that's not going to provide the state with all the flexibility that it is looking for to do what it wants to in general with health care. So there would be an 1115 waiver that would have to be prepared. And that is a whole different can of worms. That's a research and demonstration waiver. And that means just what it says. It's something, a state wants to do something, it wants to get permission from CMS to have to break the rules, to have flexibility in the rules, to test something different that under the law is not allowed in the federal Medicaid program. Well, that's like the universe, right? Will North Carolina do something that's very much in line, with what other states have done? They might. And that would certainly make it easier for that review. By and large, the bar on the 1115 is set much higher than the 1915 DC, just by the nature of it. You could be asking to do something that is just so novel or so unique that people are really going to be cautious about the approval and the implementation of it. Will North Carolina do that or not do that? How long will it take for CMS to approve that? And then once that is approved, how will that roll out? And they've already, I think, been pretty public about saying that this is going to take a number of years and that there will be some sort of, just use the term rollout. Everything isn't going to happen at once. A lot of likelihood that there would be 3 plans. One would be associated with a special needs plan that would take, let's say in general, the folks that we're talking about, the BC waiver, but there would be the added responsibility for managing health care. Would ICF be a part of that or not be a part of that long-term care for IDD individuals? So that would be one plan in general. Another plan would probably look at long-term care, again, because it's such a very expensive part of Medicaid. And then the last would be really for everything else, for general care for individuals who didn't fit into either of those two. And again, that would cover both the behavioral health and the physical health needs. But those would be for individuals that don't have, wouldn't be considered special needs, okay, or wouldn't be included in the long-term care plan. So, can you make sense of all that long-winded explanation, Bill?
Yeah, that helps a lot. I'm sure the legislature will have their oversight screening test, for sure.
There's going to be a lot of discussion this spring and summer. But that's the backdrop that we're working against. So. And as we know more, of course, the picture for us will become more clear. And then the positioning and the pacing that we need to do on this regional effort will become more clear. Now it's as much as anything focused on standardization and the business practices. So, partnership for the future, status of transition activities. Well, we had this on here, it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek because I think that's the last time you'll see it on here. It's not that everything is done per se, but for the most part it is. We're a consolidated organization and we're doing business as one. So there really isn't anything to report on that. And I guess that represents a pretty good milestone. Now that being said, we did have a flurry of activity, and actually it's happened since the time we put together the agenda and sent your packets out. But a flurry of activity on the consolidation agreement. I had a lot of discussion about this at the executive committee, and I'm going to give you the tops of the waves, and then Tracy can offer her comments too. A kind way of describing this would be to say that things weren't handled in the most expedient manner by DHHS, and there was disagreement about what had been done and what needed to be done. There were various parties that were involved. It was not until this week, in fact, and we sent it. This is about the first or second week in October. This was the document that the Western Board signed off on, and we did. So we've gone a couple of months with a lot of false starts and originally some questions that resulted in an affidavit being filed to further define and explain things, and we thought, boy, we get that done, nobody can ask any more questions. Well, until this week. That came after a conference call that Tracy and I had with an individual representing DHHS who was very apologetic about this taking so long, and the secretary's father not died. You know, we would have had our letter, and, you know, this is just a formality, and then, whoops, somebody had a different idea. General counsel for DMA, that, you know, somebody that Tracy's worked with a great deal over the years. Suffice it to say that through Tracy's work with that woman, we have come to an agreement about an amendment that would need to be made to that consolidation agreement. That would put the period at the end of the sentence, and would then result in the secretary approving the merger. And, you know, this is not how we would, you know, normally, this was literally worked out this afternoon. I mean, in between the executive committee now, and this is so fresh, it's really just been the last couple of days. And maybe, Tracy, what you could do is just give a thumbnail sketch of the issues that are clarified as part of this amendment, and kind of what's at stake.
Sure. What the department requested was some clarification around the definition in the agreement of consolidated entity. And I think it was always understood that there was going to be a consolidated entity that would have a new name. And the department was concerned that the way the agreement read, this was creating a brand new entity that they would have to go back to CMS to get approval for. Because right now, CMS has approved Smoky Mountain Center to operate the waiver. A name change is very simple with no associated tax ID change or NPI number change or anything like that. They don't have to go back to CMS. They were concerned that the way the agreement read, this was creating literally a brand new legal entity that they were going to have to start all over with, go to CMS and say, we need your approval for this entity to operate the waiver in the West. So we clarified that definition and made it clear that Smoky Mountain Center is the surviving LME MCO and will be operating in all 23 counties, that the tax ID number is staying the same, the NPI number is staying the same, so we made that clarification. They also wanted some clarification around liabilities, just to be doubly careful in the case of any future audits by the federal government. That it was very clear that Smoky Mountain Center is not responsible for any liabilities associated with Western and any potential audit findings by CMS. So those were the two major areas. So we've gone back and forth on that. I believe we have reached agreement this afternoon. And so what Brian will be receiving is a letter from the Secretary that says, upon execution of this amendment by the Smoky Mountain Center Board and the Western Highlands Board, I hereby approve the dissolution of Western Highlands Network and its merger with Smoky Mountain Center.
So that amendment, whether I would execute that or Rick would, you know, what I want to make sure, and of course this goes with Western folks, and Chuck was here this afternoon. Yeah, he's still there. What clarity do you want to have about that amendment? And I just, you know, defer to the board, you know, on that.
Does the board have to vote on that?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's a good question. You know, it's an amendment to the merger agreement that we did vote on.
I believe that they do.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the right thing to do. Let me put it that way.
I don't think they could.
Yeah. And then whether or not that's executed by Rick or me, I guess, you know, maybe that's just academic, but there's nothing about this that is to try to, you know, we're not doing anything to confuse anything. I mean, we've been a run around after this. You know, nobody from Smoky or Western's done anything wrong, tried to misrepresent anything. It's been terribly handled. and we've just continued to try to answer the questions that have been posed. You know, why these are the questions 2 months after, and after we already answered all of them before. You get my point. So, would we, basically the amendment, you have verbal agreement.
Yes.
Okay, so we have it. So it would be just a matter of getting it to folks and whatever process you would want to have around that approval. I think we would just want to get that done just as soon as we can. Without, again, not rushing anybody, but we need to get this done.
But we don't have a draft here tonight.
Well, on her computer we do. I mean, that's how it was.
How long a draft? I mean, I like to read things before I read them.
Absolutely, I understand that.
And I'm not asking you to vote tonight. I don't,
Yeah.
we're not, that's not what this is. You're just getting, I mean, this is 2 hours or an hour old. But,
Just picking up the timeline, that's all I'm asking about.
okay, so how do you want to handle this?
You want to place it over January?
I don't want to wait that long.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you can certainly, once we've got the final version, you can email it to all board members. You can call a special meeting by phone, and you can vote by phone. You do not have to all
We've done
convene.
that before.
Is that okay with everyone? So you got that?
Just do that, and I'm a little goofed up on when could we do that? The week after the first? The first comes, it's the middle of the week, so that'd be too hard. Probably the week right after that?
Well, why couldn't we go ahead and vote with just anticipation that come to us? If there's any additional corrections, just let that be in the rewrite.
Well,
So it seems to me you need this in your back pocket, so to speak, till you move on.
yeah, I don't want people to feel rushed, Bill. I mean, I appreciate the sentiment, but I think changing it at this point would be pretty hard. You know, now by the same token, anything can get changed. But, you know, it's important that people understand it and feel comfortable. And so if we, the week of the 6th, we have a special called meeting over the phone. And I mean, this is always challenging to find a time when people can participate and ask about it. But that would be, if we set that deadline, that we'd get it done that week. And Chuck, however you want to do it,
Once you get the, we'll do it the same way once you get it,
Okay.
and get it up here,
Okay.
we'll follow this, no more than 48 hours after.
Okay.
And you don't need a motion for that, and you just want to do that on the top.
No, I'm just, just figure out how we want to do it so we don't lose any time.
Everybody okay with addressing it that way? Okay.
I'd like to know how many other county board commissioners have their first meeting of the month on January 6th in the afternoon.
Cancel that.
Also, don't do it on that Monday.
Don't do it on that Monday afternoon.
Okay. Again, I'm open to any time you want to do it. It's harder to try to schedule these things. Well, we got a meeting, I don't know. You'll have the pleasure of figuring this out. Just do it at a time that's convenient for everyone. Don't disappoint anyone. All right. We had a lot of discussion about this at the executive committee meeting. We are having some real challenges dealing with DMA around our rates. And we've had a lot of back and forth over the past 2-3 months and have just not gotten to a place that we're comfortable with. And that's in relationship to a couple of different areas, really the expense associated with the contract termination of Western and what it's taken to kind of move all of that forward into a consolidated organization. And, the state doesn't have a good way of helping with that at this point. So we're wanting to give them every opportunity to assist with that. So that's one agenda item. The other has to do with, it's a little harder to describe, but the way the state approaches setting rates and those things for which they change the rate and those things for which they choose to not change the rate. And we are in disagreement with their handling of that in a couple of areas. One, with the smoky rates going forward January 1st, around, it's called the woodwork effect, of additional folks that have always been eligible for Medicaid, basically, but never knew they were, and with all this attention paid, sign up. And, actually I questioned this, not because I'm so darn smart, but just I wondered, when we had our rate meeting, why the assumption was that those individuals that would be new members, so therefore they become part of the multiplier for our rate. You remember how that PM works, that they would have less exposure to our services, so therefore we would have a reduced rate. And Mercer, who's the state's professionals for dealing with these rates and making sure that they're actuarially sound, reference their experience in other states, and certainly they have that. They do this all over the country, SAMHSA studies and things like that. Well, and in fact, the information, and Tracy, reminded us of some of the reports that are out now that it's absolutely the contrary of that. And these are reports that are being written about nationally and well-founded. So, you have a model, they guessed about how many more members there are going to be, and they have guessed that their experience is going to be less, and therefore reduced our rate, as opposed to other situations where we know there is additional expense because of rates that are associated with, there's just kind of a strange caveat where DMA posts certain rates for state institutions that we are required to adhere to. We have no flexibility up to a point, but they didn't open up the rates for that. We're just supposed to suck that up. And they had really an occasion to do that, to bypass that. So, this isn't right, so we'll have our day in court. Oh, and we get to go tomorrow at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Right. No, I mean, we know there will be more. How many, you don't know, but yet, their methodology for calculating the reduction is based on these two assumptions. So, I mean, you take something like that that's a complete unknown, and you open up the contract and reduce the rates, but yet we've been told we have to honor rate increases that DMA has posted. So it's real dollar. We know down to the penny, Lisa Slusher calculated it's $1.4 million.
1.7.
$1.7 million, 27 cents. It's real money that we're supposed to pay out. Well, they didn't do anything with the rates and this. Does that make sense to you? It doesn't make sense to me either. And every time I ask the question, I haven't gotten an answer. So, we might have to take hostages, so watch the news at 11 o'clock.
So you think the 4 consolidated element in MCOs will have more lobbying power, perhaps?
You'd like to think so, really.
Because it's obvious that they're just either messing up intentionally or messing up by ignorance or whatever. It's hurting people.
No, it isn't. Okay, now, got something really special for you tonight. I've been looking forward to this. You know, Vantage Point, you know, is our commitment every month. I have to give Jerry some credit for reminding us what all this is about, you know. I guess you can appreciate why we have to deal with all this other stuff. Because you know it's in service of getting money pumped in the treatment services people need. So it's for a good reason that we tend all of this, but it's all in service of people getting what they should have. And you know, each month we've been telling a story. And we had a couple of really good ones. One about a family with the innovations waiver, and then last month we talked about mobile crisis. Very timely because we've had a change in the Western Highlands communities with a new provider there. Got to talk about some great benefits that individuals receive from that service. And tonight we get to talk about one of our own. And it's a real great opportunity to highlight not only a staff member at Smoky, Richie Tannerhill, and I'm going to let Jenny tell you a little bit about Richie and the work he does. But to tell a great story too, so it's got a double win. So Jenny, I'm going to give you the great pleasure of introducing Mr. Tannerhill, if you would, please.
Thank you, Brian. I am Jenny Pugh, and I'm the Senior Director for Community Collaboration at Smoky. And Community Collaboration is one of the main places where Smoky really touches our communities. One of our teams at Community Collaboration is Consumer Family Support Team. Most of the team members in that team are individuals who have real lived experience with mental health, substance abuse, or intellectual developmental disability concern. It's a part of their life history. It enables them to do great work. 8 members of the team today graduated from a RAP trainers course. They are now certified to go out into the world to lead RAP sessions. They could do this internationally with this certification. We're only asking them to do it across 23 counties. This certification allows them to go out and lead individuals in developing personal wellness recovery action plans. These plans help people identify the tools they can use in recovery. They help people have hope. They help people find support. They help people take personal responsibility. They help people self-advocate, and they help people go on to support others. We talked this afternoon that it was really great that this graduation was occurring at this time of the year because it's a season of giving gifts. And these individuals who faced a lot of hardship gave another gift by taking this course, learning these skills so they could go out and give those gifts to others. Richie Tannerhill, who's going to speak to you tonight, was one of those 8 who gained that international certification today. A month ago, Richie received an award at a state recovery conference. At this conference every year, one person receives an award as a recovery champion. And Richie Tannerhill received that award for the state of North Carolina this year. As a part of all of this work, the peer support counselors and the RAP trainers often share their own personal story as a way of connecting with other consumers, other people in the community, to offer them that hope. And Richie generously agreed to come tonight and share some of that story with me.
Thank you. I've had the opportunity to do this a few times, but I don't think my heart's ever beaten this fast before. So I don't know why I'm extremely nervous tonight. So she said we're only asked to do this in 23 counties, but I don't know the way things are changing. We might be international before long, right? Outside of my position here at Smoky, Peer and Family Support Specialist, I like to introduce myself as a grateful Peer and Family Support Specialist because I am just that, I'm grateful. I'm also a husband and a father, youth pastor at my church, general construction contractor, Little League ball coach when I can find time. Things are really good. Life is full and it's rewarding. And I feel very blessed. Unfortunately, though, it hasn't always been that way. I want to share with y'all a story tonight about how life can be for someone with no supports, someone with no chance, no help, but most of all for someone with no hope. I want to give y'all some highlights of my life tonight, but it's very important to me that you don't remember the bad things that I'm going to talk about. What I want you to focus on is how good a life of recovery is. That it actually does happen, despite popular myth. And how good God is, because for me, He's a big part of it. So, born to drug-addicted, alcoholic parents, life's roughest roads were to lay ahead for me. For the first year of my life, I was passed around from aunt to aunt and friend to friend, and pretty much whoever took whoever. By the time I was 4, I had lived in at least 5 different states. My father had been sentenced to a very long prison sentence. Shortly after which, my mom married an abusive stepfather who was also an alcoholic. I can remember smoking marijuana with my mom as early as age 4. 4 years old with mom. I can only begin to explain the pain that drugs and alcohol would cause me over the next 27 years. Early, I became a rebellious, troublesome child. My first run-in with the police was in the 2nd grade. And over the next few years, I can remember stealing the marijuana from mom and sneaking beers out of the fridge. I can remember one morning in particular, when I was 9, after a friend of mine spent the night, we stole some liquor from the in-house bar. And we headed up to the school and we went and we drank this liquor, becoming very intoxicated. Broke into the school that day, causing several $1,000s of damage. Actually got caught stealing inside the school. It was the first time I had a gun pulled on me, and also my first of many arrests. Now looking back, I can remember that really didn't scare me. I can remember actually wanting him to pull the trigger. A year or so later, it was for stealing bicycles, other things. By the time I was 12, I had my own connections for buying drugs. Was skipping school on a regular basis. And when I was there, I often got into trouble. About a month or so before my 13th birthday, my stepfather was stationed in Hawaii. And for me, this is when real trouble began. After moving there, I quickly became connected with the drug scene, the wrong kinds of people. I was hanging out with a much older crowd, dealing drugs with my peers. By the time I was 14, I had done cocaine, mushrooms, LSD, pills, anything I could find. I was truly fearless. I can remember my first inpatient stay at a mental hospital when I was 14. By the time I was 15, I added injecting methamphetamines to the long list of drugs I had used. I can remember when I was 15, I was actually held hostage by some pretty serious drug dealers, escaping with my life only after overhearing a conversation where they was going to dump my body. By the time I was 16, I had officially quit school and was living on my own. And no big surprise, I served my first prison sentence at age 16. By the time I was 17, I was smoking crack on a regular basis along with anything else I could find. At 18, I was in full-blown alcoholism, drinking beer just to wake up and function in the morning. Another 6 months jail sentence at 18, along with a court-ordered 30-day inpatient treatment program. At 19, 6 more months in jail. At 20, I landed in the North Carolina Penitentiary where I turned 21 and 22. By the time I was 24, I would be on my way back to prison for getting 5 DUIs. 2 because of alcohol, and the other 3 because of prescription medications. However, before I would serve this prison sentence, I would end up right over here in the Owen Hart Heart Trauma Unit, Mission Hospital, fighting for my life after being stabbed in the heart over a drug deal gone bad. This resulted in open heart surgery, 5 stitches in the bottom of my heart. You would have thought that would have got my attention. Unfortunately, it did not. Over the next 6 years, I accumulated several more arrests, including a Class A felony for trafficking marijuana through Alabama. With my prior prison record, this charge could have given me 20 years had I been convicted. By the time I was 30, cocaine nearly claimed my life twice, overdosing 2 times by injecting this drug. However, by this time, my true drug of choice is methamphetamines. Not only was I injecting this drug on a daily basis, I was also making it. I was in a full-speed downward spiral, for which the only end for me would be jail or death. And thank God it was jail. At 31, I was back in jail. Had a $300,000 bond, several serious felony charges, and I was facing another 10 to 15 years in prison. My life was truly in shambles. It was worse than it had ever been. I was financially, spiritually, physically, mentally broken. I hit my true bottom. You see, even though my life might have seemed hopeless at the time, for me, I was about to go through the greatest change I would ever know. I was beaten, broken, hopeless, lost, without a doubt. I remember laying in that jail cell that day praying for a way out. And through the anger and rage, through the resentments, through the emptiness inside, through the tears, I remember crying out to God, and in my heart, I knew He heard. said, here I am, Lord. I said, God, man, I'm lost. I feel so all alone. I'm hurting worse than I've ever known. I heard a small voice that said, here I am, Richie. Let me help you grieve. For your salvation, all you must do is simply believe. Now, I can't explain the peace that I felt inside that day, but for the first time in my life, I knew everything would be all right. And I still had a rough road ahead of me, but for Richie, from that day on, I would live for Jesus Christ. Now, after that last arrest and spending over 9 months in the county jail, half of it in solitary confinement, I thought I was fixed. You see, I turned it over. I was forgiven, and everything was supposed to go away. Well, fortunately, and I say fortunately, the judge had another plan. He sentenced me to 18 months in prison. It turned out to be exactly what I needed. I was able to spend over a year in a long-term treatment program, where I got a lot of tools, plus clean time that I needed, where I was first introduced to peer support. I finally got out in November 2007, and since then, through a life of recovery, I've been blessed more than I could ever have asked for. Now I've gotten full custody of my kids back that DSS took, said I would never get back. I'm happily married, youth pastor at a great church. Got my driver's license back after being lifetime permanent revoked. I've been glad to do that for you. You know, so many blessings through this life full of recovery. I'm a very determined person. I love it today when people tell me I can't do something. Man, this motivates me because I know better and I welcome a good challenge. I've realized today that I don't even have to have bad days anymore. You know, I know what that's like. I know what it's like to be cold, hungry, homeless, lonely, lost, facing a life sentence in prison. Most of all, not to have any hope. That's a bad day. What I have now is a bad 5 or 10 minutes, and I realize that if I can take those 5 or 10 minutes, take it into perspective and deal with it right then, I don't have to let those 5 or 10 minutes ruin, determine, or dictate the rest of my day. What I know is that some problems, and they're going to come across my plate that are so small they don't even deserve Richie's time at all. They just deserve letting go of. There is no doubt that my mental health challenges, my substance use challenges was the root of my problems. But you see, I never really had anyone to offer me any help or tell me about a better life or explain this thing called hope to me. That's one of the reasons why I'm here today, to spread the message. And that message is recovery does happen. That message is that there are no hopeless cases. That's part of the story that led me to smoking. Since coming here, there's a new chapter that's being written. The support that I've received since coming here has just been amazing. The training that I've been able to receive, the peer support training, the rap training, tools that I've gotten that have become pillars in my recovery, the opportunity to work with folks in our IDD community, to work at places like Special Olympics, places that have literally changed my life, changed the conversations that we have at the dinner table, changed some of the language that we use. The way that I've been embraced and the tools that I've been given, I just can't imagine not having them. I'm a firm believer that the success of any organization is because great leadership filters down. And I got that. My first day on the job, I can remember sitting in an office with another peer that had been hired, thinking, what is this really about? And Dr. Martin come in and sat down that first day and said, I just want you to know that we appreciate you. We are glad that you're here, and we're glad you're a part of the team. Welcome to the team. And that really meant something to me. When he walked out, I looked at Julie and I said, well, who is that guy? So we had to go find out who that guy was. And I was like, that's Dr. Martin. So I was really amazed that he would come in and spend time with me like that. Shortly after that, I was in a room, and we was just talking. It wasn't even a meeting. Maybe it was before a meeting. And there was this guy who had a lot of spunk, which I admire because I'm a pretty energetic person, who was talking to me just like an everyday average person. And when this guy left, I had to go find out who that was. I was like, who is that guy? They said, and that's Brian Ingram. That's our CEO. I'm like, wow, what's he doing talking to me? And I was kind of hoping that Christina Carter would be here because, man, she is a warrior. The opportunities that she's been able to put in place for me to have been great. And it's not even about Richie. It's about more than me. It's about the people that we serve. having the opportunity to work with folks that are struggling in some of the same pits that I used to. People that I know that are going to benefit from these peer support trainings that we're going to offer in the community, from these RAP trainings that we're going to offer in the community. Not because we have to, but because we care. And when Jerry was speaking earlier, one thing that I picked up on was, man, me and this guy's got something in common. Because he's talking about the people. He cares about the people. Jerry, I care about the people too. And you know what's super cool is that my bosses here at Smoky care about the people. I believe that they've bought into the vision that despite the myth, people can get better. And not only can they, let's take it a step farther and say that they do get better. Folks, I can't explain with words how great it feels to be a part of an organization that shares the same vision that I do. Folks are hurting all over. There are folks that are out there that are hopeless. I know what that's like. I know what it's like to be an 11-year-old little boy cussing God, walking the streets at 2 o'clock in the morning saying, God, you're a coward if you don't take me out of this world. That's hopelessness. And when I think about being able to be a small part of helping someone find their joy, their happiness, or their hope, man, indeed, I'm the lucky one. Because when I think about entitlements, those are the true entitlements of life. Happiness, joy, hope, man, those things are for everybody. Everybody's got the right to that. So thank you, Smokey, for letting me be a small part of a piece of a puzzle. Thank you, Smokey, for letting me be a small part of the vision. One more thing, I forgot to thank Jenny, our director here at Community Collaboration. Thank you for letting me be a part of the team. Thank you for letting me be boots on the ground, because that's where it's at, man. Boots on the ground, baby.
Well. No, there's nothing better than that, Richie. Thank you so much. I think the one, last thing to do is to really, just for me, and I know all the staff feel this way too, is to really thank you for all the support you guys have had. It's emotional. And to remind you to take a Christmas gift before you leave and enjoy your dinner. Appreciate everything you folks do, and I know we can't, offer you enough. Thanks.
Brian, could I ask a question? And I'm not sure I know how to articulate this, but everybody sitting at this table knows that we will be starting our budget process. All counties will here shortly. Now, we know that we were told a couple of months ago that the secretary would sign these documents and that 30 days would start to roll for the reconstituted board after that. And then it was put off. She hadn't signed it. We were told at the last meeting it would be signed within the next 3 or 4 days after the last meeting. I assume now that she still has not signed it. Is that correct?
Correct.
And now we're to the point where we're saying that it sounds to me like that everything has changed. It's all back. Anybody doesn't seem to know what's going to happen. And I know at one point we were talking that once we reach that 1.2 million catchment area, that that we could have the board that we wish to have with the Secretary's approval, of course. Now we're talking about 35 counties, and of course that's going to more than reach the 2 million catchment area. My question is, how do we deal with this maintenance of effort money? How do we deal with this reconstituted board that It may or may not happen, we don't know what's coming forth in the budget process. You said a few moments ago that Mitchell County had sent out a resolution about the reconstituted board and the maintenance of everything. So I'm just wondering, how are we going to deal with this as counties on the maintenance of effort money and on this reconstituted board as we go forward?
Well, my opinion on that is it doesn't change anything. You still are making a choice about funding services in your county. And choosing to have Smoky apply those funds to where we believe they would provide the greatest benefit. Nothing about that changes.
Okay. Well, what about the reconstituted board? At what point is this 30 days going to begin? Is the secretary ever going to sign these documents? Or
Yes, I believe so. And that was the description that Tracy gave you this evening, and that I spoke about, and Rick indicated the plan to have that board, that newly constituted board meet for the first time in February.
can you tell me how many counties, as of tonight, have not signed, have not voted on the reconstituted board?
14 have voted yes and 2 have voted no, the rest have not voted.
So 14 and what?
14 have voted yes and 2 have voted no, and the rest
16,
have not
so
done anything.
23 counties have actually voted.
16. And I think you address it the same as you always have, like Ryan said. I think when you go through the budget process, you address it the same way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to say that it's a very powerful statement, and all of us, are working to give people hope in our own way. And I'm glad to have been part of this organization. The things I've heard, mental health is one of the people who told me over and over again to address when I get elected. So I'm glad that I've been on this board, and I think we need to keep remembering these are people's lives we're talking about, and whatever madness is going on at the legislative level, we need to try to do our best to not let people hurt by that. And that's what I'm here. Thank you all.
Thank you. Are we still going to adopt the consent agenda? On the back of your agenda is 2 items of the consent agenda: approval of the November 21st, 2013 Board of Directors minutes and the at-a-glance report.
You want to do those?
Yes.
I believe we accept both of them.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? One last issue to mention, our next meeting, the date of our next meeting is January 23rd, 2014. And I believe we'll be meeting in the Buckland facility, will not be here. And please come to help with some special recognitions that night. And having said that, is there a motion for adjournment?
Don't forget to pick up your Christmas goodies over there. We can't take them back home, so that'll
We have a motion to adjourn. Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you, everybody.